In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up for your depth of field aperture practice. So you're going to need 3 to 5 objects that are roughly about hand size and that have some interesting details on them. And you're going to need a camera and a relatively long space with a background that's not overly distracting. First, set up your objects, and you're going to want to give a little bit of space between your objects and some space between wherever your background is. That way, we'll be able to tell when the focal range goes through, what objects will be in focus and what objects will be out of focus. Otherwise, if we put them all too close together, you're going to need a super high power camera to get differences between the space between those. And that guy doesn't want to stand up, but that's okay. The next thing that you want to do is make sure that you're set up in the right place. You're going to set up with your camera shooting through your different objects. And I'm not holding it right now because it's easier for me to take pictures this way, but you don't want to be too directly above your scene, nor do you want to be directly on the side of your scene. That won't work. So I'm going to set up my camera here, and if we're thinking about our aspects that affect depth of field, first off is proximity. So make sure that you're about within arm's length of the first object from wherever you're shooting. Next is focal range or focal length. So set up your camera and change your range to about telephoto, starting around like 55 millimeters. Third is making sure that you're in aperture priority mode, so AV mode, so that when you're ready to start shooting, get that. When we play with the dial, it just plays with our f-stop, changing how wide open or how narrow our aperture is. When you start shooting, again, you want to be pretty close to your object, and we're going to try to set up kind of a rule of thirds shot. So I'm going to play with my focal ring, so then I can focus in on our first object. And it's a little bit blurry shooting through my phone at the camera, but my first object is in focus. I'm going to move it over just a little bit so it has a little bit of space to itself and it feels important. I'm kind of setting up this shot so that we're creating a little bit of movement with how they're looking, as well as it's moving through my scene in kind of a leading line rule of thirds sort of design with the other objects. So once you have your camera set up and focused in on your first object, you're going to set your f-stop down to a very wide aperture, so f5.6, and then you're going to take a picture. Then you are not going to alter too much your range. You're not going to move where you're standing. You're not going to move the objects. You're not going to move the focus. You're just going to narrow down the f-stop to f8 and take another picture. And you're going to stay in the same spot. And you're going to alter the f-stop one more time to f16 and take a picture. Now what that's going to do, and it's kind of hard to see on my phone here, but within my different designs, there's going to be, our first one is going to be in shallow depth of field, where only one thing is in focus and the other things are blurry, and then it'll progressively get more and more out of focus. Let me see if I can get closer here. You can see there's our shallow depth of field, then we have a medium depth of field where it gets a little bit more in focus, and then we'll have a deeper depth of field where more is in focus as a whole. So that's all you need to do for that.